Aloha, welcome back to the Anxiety Coaches Podcast. I'm your host and coach, Gina Ryan, and I'm so happy to be with you again today as we consider the many ways to bring your mind and body back to its natural peace and calm. Today's episode continues the second half of my fascinating conversation with Terri Cole. If you missed part one, I highly recommend listening to it before diving into this episode. It's packed with incredible insights. Terri is a global empowerment and relationship expert with a knack for turning complex psychological concepts into practical, actionable steps. Her mission? Helping us all achieve vibrant mental health and healthier, more empowered relationships, starting with ourselves. Her latest book, Too Much, A Guide to Breaking the Cycle of High-Functioning Codependency, just launched in October, and today we're continuing to explore her fresh perspective on codependent behaviors and how we can begin to break free from them. Let's jump right back into the conversation.
We don't love asking for help. Does that ring true for you, Gina?
Oh, absolutely. I'm loving that you're saying that because myself and the people that I've worked with all these years, it's like you put yourself in that place of helping. I'm here for you. And then when you need help, it's almost like you don't even ask. It's
Right.
like, well, we just jumped in and took care of everything for everybody else. Why isn't that happening for me?
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the thing is, we've trained people. The thing that was hard for me to accept in my 20s, which of course I did eventually, but was that even though I was angry and I felt like people were entitled, and my therapist was like, are they though? Or are you just serving yourself up on a silver platter?
Yeah.
And then you're mad because they're not behaving the way that you think they should or whatever it is. And I was like, wow, that's really what it is. Because so much of what I was doing was unprovoked by others. I was the initiator. And then I think as HFCs, a lot of times we do what's called positive projection, where we project positively onto other people, like that they're like us, like they have the same qualities. And the way we see something, they will see something the same way. And that's not true, because a lot of times what happens is when you're an overgiver, you have a tendency to attract takers.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. So they are not thinking as you do.
No.
I love that, projecting the positivity. Yeah, because we just think, well, everybody would do this for me. It's what I do. Why am I sitting here with a horrible cold and no one's bringing me chicken soup, right?
Exactly.
I've been taking chicken soup to the neighbors all these years. Yeah, because
Yes.
no one even expects. Is it also too because we look on the outside as if we can handle everything? We don't ever ask.
Yes. I mean, that is definitely a part of being an HFC. We do have a mostly very pulled together. People make assumptions about, like, I don't know, Gina, I can say this is true. This is true about me right now still, even though I've been in recovery for years, because of projecting the way that I do. Nobody except my really innermost circle is thinking, I wonder if Terry's okay. They're like, obviously she's okay. She's the one we all go to. Clearly she's okay. When is she not okay? So when you think about it, we do it to ourselves because there's a part of us that doesn't like to be vulnerable. Because think about it. What does it require of us to ask for help?
Yeah. That we need something, that we are not perfect, that, yes, exactly. We are not saving the world all of a sudden. Yeah.
Correct. So what can we do? Let's move into solutions. And listen, you guys, yes, you can.
I do have one
Go ahead.
question prior to getting into solutions. I was wondering if you could address, how did we get here?
Sure.
How did we get here? Because I think that's a question that comes up a lot around anxiety. Well, why do I have it? What brought me here? How did we get here?
A whole combination of ways. And I hate to say, let's go back to the scene of the crime, which is the family of origin, but we will, because we must, because that is where it all begins. That's the beginning of the story. what I find in my practice is that people with chaotic backgrounds become HFCs. People
Mhm.
with what I would consider a pretty relatively normal background also become HFCs, partly
Okay.
because of the patriarchal system that we live in and that
Mhm.
most of us were raised in, especially if you're over the age of like 40 or 50, right? I mean, I feel like the tide is turning a little now with raising kids now, but those of us who are over 45, let's say, there was really a societal pressure to be a particular way. So be a good girl, turn that frown around. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. So nobody was encouraging us to tell the truth about how we felt. Be helpful was major. Be
Yeah.
nice. In my family system, it was more important to be perceived as being nice than almost anything else, which is
Mhm.
so wild, where you're like, how is that like the holy grail of life when
Yeah.
it's an illusion too, because nobody is nice all the time. That's just not real. So I don't even think we had to have had a traumatic background.
Okay.
I really don't. Because as much as my family, I've got my own tons of skeletons in my family closet, but I wouldn't say I had complex childhood trauma. I would not say that I did. And yet
Yeah.
I was a massive high functioning codependent always from such a young age, from
Yeah.
being a child. I was 4
Yeah.
and helping a 6-year-old girl who other kids didn't like. And I was like, I'll be your friend. Don't listen to those idiots. And like, I'm literally walking home with a kid 2 years old. I'm only 4. Like, nature and nurture, I know it's a combo, but I definitely have seen in my therapy practice. And I do, my unofficial, non scientific theory is
Mhm.
that if you look at what happened in the 60s and the 70s, when the world started changing for women, women could only get a credit card by themselves without a male cosigner in 1973. You could only get a business loan, a small business loan, without a male cosigner in 1986. Like, do you understand this is not that long ago?
Mhm.
So, what was happening is that finally, women were breaking into other careers where it used to be you could be a secretary, you could be a teacher, you could be a nurse, and that's what you could be,
Mhm.
or a homemaker. Those are your choices. Enjoy. So, when we started weaseling our way into becoming engineers and becoming therapists and becoming other things, I felt like the vibe for women were like, but don't worry, men, we'll still do everything.
Yes.
Just
Definitely.
don't take away our creativity and our earning power and our ambition. Let us have our ambition and we'll
Mhm.
do all the emotional labor and we'll make sure the house runs smoothly. We'll do the kids. We'll do the end of the year gifts for the teachers. We'll do it all.
Mhm.
Just don't take that away because it was like finally women were doing something more than, I mean, we were for hundreds of years not doing anything because we weren't allowed to because up until 1887 we were property. So that's my unofficial thought
Yes.
about why the overfunctioning,
Yeah.
because we were so psyched to be able to get into decent careers and do something interesting in the world besides raising kids.
Absolutely. And I also have a lot of male clients who
Oh,
fill
yes.
these too. And so a question that comes up for me often is, what is the part of us, the nurture part or the nature part rather, that we actually, what part of our personality do we come into this world with that would make us a little bit more susceptible to leaning toward becoming high functioning
Being an
codependent?
empath, right?
Okay.
Being an
Yeah.
empath, being a
Yeah.
highly sensitive person.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, HFCs, you could be an extrovert or an introvert and be an HFC, right? Because some people are just quietly doing it all, and others are more boisterous about the way that they're doing it all, or more fun, or more funny, or, there's different archetypes that I have
Yeah.
with HFCs where you have people who are more like the director, which is someone who is like more bossy outwardly. And then you have
Mm.
ones who are like the entertainer, who the way that they help avoid conflict is they come into a room and they're just mesmerizing. So
Mm.
whatever is happening, all eyes are sort of on them and they know everything is okay because they're making people laugh or they're telling an engaging story. Like, it's just so fascinating to see the different archetypes over the many years that I've been doing this. So it can present itself
Mm.
differently, lots of different personalities. And you make a great point about men. And what I'm discovering, and I'm probably going to have to like put an addendum in the book, but what I'm discovering is that there are two ways that it goes for HFC women in relationships, it seems. Either like me, where I wasn't interested in getting married. I had multiple careers. I'd made a lot of money. I was independent. I traveled around the world. I just did whatever the hell I wanted to do because my parents' marriage didn't look great. And my mother was like, get an education to make your own money. And I was like, sounds good. I really understood the assignment and did it. Then when I met my husband, by that point, I was like, I actually don't want to get married. But then I met him and he was perfect for me. Not perfect, just perfect for me. And he is even more of an HFC than I am. And I feel like for me, it could only be that I would eternally partner with someone who was so friggin' capable that I could actually exhale, that I could relax, that I could trust. He's so trustworthy. He's so earnest. He's so decent. He's just such a good person, but he's so capable that I could finally exhale in my life when I was 30, whatever. I mean, we didn't get married till I was 35, but maybe 33. So, or the other way is that you're an HFC in a relationship with a severe underfunctioner a lot of times. So you're really doing a lot of the things. And the other person, there is an expectation that you will be the default parent, that you will be the one who does all the emotional labor in the home. You keep the ship of the home life running. A lot of times you keep the ship of the home life running and you're making the money and you're paying the bills. I mean, like I've had clients who their partner was like having another child for them. And that's severe HFC.
Now, is that inability to exhale, is that part of why HFCs would become anxious? I'm trying to, like you just can't, your nervous system never gets to rest.
Yes, here's the thing, it's the hypervigilance, right? When you're an HFC, think about what that means, right? It means that we are super dialed into what is happening all around us all the time, which requires your nervous system to be nervous, which requires your nervous system to be at attention. So this is fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? So for me, the being able to exhale, and I was also had at that point, luckily, a lot of years of therapy before I met my husband, and so had he, because I was like, no more unexamined minds. No more guys who have not had a shit ton of therapy. I'm not doing it. I'm not interested in a guy who doesn't know a feeling from a Frankfurter. I'm not like that. They don't understand their own origin story. Like I can't. They don't know their wounds. They don't know their triggers. Like it's too much. It's hard enough to know all that crap about yourself. I was like so overdoing it for the other person, you know? And so my husband had a lot of therapy, which was good. But I think the exhaling part is just finally finding someone who I believed in a way that I could trust. And I became healthy enough to attract someone who was like that. And of course, according to him, I inherited his mess. He was widowed. He had 3 acting out teenage sons. I moved to New Jersey. Like we both think we won the lottery. So I feel like that's probably a good relationship.
Awesome. Well, that kind of brings us then to what do? We find ourselves in this situation, Terri, and I know you have a lot of practical tools. The book is going to be a godsend to people who are identifying with this. But can you give us some ideas of what do we do now? We feel it. We notice this is what we're doing. Where to begin?
So let's start with the auto advice giving. Let's just start there because it's an easy one to recognize.
Okay.
And you might be shocked at how hard it is to stop, but you can, because I did, and I was the worst offender ever. So I know if I can stop, you definitely can too. So what does that look like? That looks like no matter who you're talking to, the first stop on your conversation bus cannot be giving your opinion or your well-researched advice on anything. Your first stop will always be now. Well, let's start with what you think you should do. If they say they don't know. All right, but if you did know, what would it be? What does your gut say? How do you feel? Because again, it's really recognizing that I really don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know what my sister should do, and I don't know. I've got great advice. But for me to become more intimate, and for all of you listening to become more intimate in your relationships, listening is what it's about. Even with kids, you have a 10-year-old who's like comes home from school and says, I got into a fight today. I'm so mad. Instead of being like, we don't fight in this house, or you're going to go in there tomorrow and tell that kid,
Yeah.
Go. Okay. Take it from the top. Tell me what happened. He tells you what happened, or she tells you what happened. Now tell me what you think you should do. I don't care if this kid is 5. Start teaching deductive reasoning, critical thinking, right? Right. Consequences for actions. When we interact with children and teenagers and young adults in a way that says what you think matters. Because here's the most painful part for me, maybe about this whole thing, was the recognition that what I was really doing with my sister, unintentionally, but I was doing it, was centering my sister's situation on me. And when we immediately give someone advice, when we auto advice give, that's what we're doing. They're trying to tell us something that hurts them, that's messy, that's gross, that's, whatever. And we just really would like it to stop.
Yeah.
I have a therapist for you. I have a book for you. I have a thing for you. I have an oncologist for you. Stop having all the answers, because you don't. And what it does is it cuts the person off. So if you want to know, children or anyone in your life, even a long-term partner, ask expansive questions. And then what did you do? And then what did you think? And then what did you feel? What we're doing here is, and listen, I'm not saying if you have great advice, I'm not saying after the person tells you what they think, you can't say, well, I was in a similar situation in 1985, and what I did was this. I don't know if it'll help you. Maybe it will. So I'm not saying it's a crime to share your well-worn advice, right? That you probably have great advice. I'm not saying that. I'm saying what we have to understand, because a lot of times people will give me pushback and say, well, maybe I'm just nice, Terri. What do you think about that? I'm like, here's the thing, buddy. If you can't not do it, it's not you being nice. It's a compulsion, like any other compulsion. So we have to slow it down enough to make a mindful choice. So much with HFC, we're reacting, is a habituated response to something. So I promise you, everyone listening, if you did one thing and you stopped auto advice giving, you just stopped weighing in the second someone says something about their life, it will literally change your relationships. So that's one really important thing that you guys can do. But there's also boundaries, right? We have to understand in Boundary Boss, which we were talking about at the top, my first book, the lens that I wrote a lot of that through was the lens of how do we get other people? Oh, right there. If you're watching this, there's that book. How do we get other people to respect our boundaries? How do we set boundaries, and how do we hold them in place? And how do we, right? This book, the realization for me in writing this book was like, oh my God, as an HFC, I'm kind of the boundary trampler. Like, I'm a bit of a boundary bully. Again, inadvertently. Because what are we doing when we're assuming that we know what someone should do with their life and we're telling them what we think about everything? We're literally trampling on their sovereignty, right? Not on purpose. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. We've all done, anyone who's at HFC has done it, but recognizing that boundaries are important and that people have the right to succeed and fail. They have the right to thrive and to flail. But here's the thing. As HFCs, we do not like anybody flailing in our vicinity. We don't like flailing at all. But what does real love tell us? There has to be a level of acceptance. Sometimes people are having their dark night of the soul, right? And that flex that we talked about before, if you can be there, if you can be in the foxhole, witnessing with compassion, having faith. What do I say to kids? What do I say to people I love? I have no doubt you're going to figure this out.
Yeah.
And the reality is, and you know this, they're literally the only one who can. What my therapist had said to me that I think really moved the needle for me and changed my perspective is she said, Terri, listen, I'm not saying you shouldn't help your sister. I'm saying you can't. Like, she's like, I'm not saying, she said, I'm not saying you shouldn't save your sister. I'm saying you can't save your sister. That she has to save herself. So there's also a relief in the recognition that you're not on the hook for every neighbor with a sniffle. right?
Yeah.
You're not on the hook to bring them all friggin' soup. You're actually not. And that there's nothing wrong with doing nice things, but we have to look at it and go, here are the two questions you're going to ask yourself, you guys, before you commit to anything. Number one, can I do this? Do I have the bandwidth to do this without becoming resentful?
Yeah.
Number two, do I even friggin' want to do it?
That's powerful. That's a question we don't ask often.
No,
I want to.
we don't, because when someone else wants us to, because we are all at heart good girls and good boys.
Mm-hmm.
If someone wants me to help them, it inspires me to want to help them. I feel like I should.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not to say that we will not be, listen, your nature is your nature, trust me. What I'm talking about with getting into recovery from being an HFC is all of the amazing qualities that make you an HFC. Your kindness, your caring, your desire to help. I feel like we are the ones that Mr. Rogers was talking about. Look for the helpers. That's us. We are the helpers. Honestly, we are. We'll still be those things. We'll just be them better because we're taking the dysfunction out of the experience. We are prioritizing ourselves. If you ask that question, can I do this without becoming resentful? And the answer is no, I'm really tired. I don't think I can, right? Because we don't consider ourselves in the same way that we consider other people. So part of the process of getting better, being in recovery, means that you have to consider yourself first. What you think, how you feel, what you want matters. But those three things need to matter to you more than what anyone else wants, thinks, or feels.
Beautiful. My gosh, Terri, thank you for tying it all up there, because that's what we really need to remember. It's so much. And I know that if this is resonating with you who are listening, you have to get this book. Again, Terri, tell us Too Much, A Guide to Breaking the Cycle of High Functioning Codependency. And tell us where we can find you all over the internet, and anything else you want us to know before we head out.
Right. Great. I have a community of like-minded, like-hearted, empathic souls who are mostly HFCs in recovery or getting there. So if that's interesting, you can go to terricole.com/TCM for Terri Cole membership. Very simple. And I meet weekly with a group. It's a beautiful, and it is actually exclusively for women. But I love that group so much. And it's a very beautiful place to do this work. Because we all need to do it, but we really don't want to do it alone. We really don't. So if you would like to be guided through and have your questions answered by me every week, I love it so much. It's literally my favorite thing is my group. So that's one thing. I have a gift for you. So it's an HFC toolkit. So if you're like, oh my God, where do I start? This is a great place to start. And on this page will also be a link where you can purchase the book, which will bring you to all the bonuses. Because I just give the bonuses I know people love to be like, the bonuses are running out. Why? I made them as bonuses. They will be there until the end of time. In the meantime, so you would go to terricole.com/HFC to get the HFC toolkit. And you guys can find me where I hang out most is Instagram. And I have a podcast I've had since 2015. We were talking about this before we went live. And that's called The Terri Cole Show, which anywhere you get your podcasts, you can find.
Awesome. Awesome, Terri. Thank you so much. I will have those links in the show notes to make it easy for people. And I so appreciate your time and your wisdom. You've given a lot of clarity on exactly what it is. I think we have evolved from the Melody Beatty days, which was a beautiful stepping stone. And now, just like with everything else in life, it continues to unfold. And I appreciate you being a really big part of that. Thanks for taking time with my listeners.
Thank you so much for having me, Jay.
Be well, Terri. Aloha.
Aloha.
I'll be back in a few more days with another podcast. Until then, be well and aloha.